The afternoon sun poured like melted gold over Crestwood Hills, a neighborhood that smelled of trimmed grass, quiet money, and silent judgment. A young black woman stepped out of a rideshare, her tailored gray dress moving in rhythm with her confident stride. She looked like order in motion, calm, composed, and utterly out of place to the eyes watching from behind the curtains. Mara Lane had just moved in. Or at least, that's what the paperwork said. To the neighbors, she was an unknown variable in a perfect equation. To herself, she was an undercover federal agent sent to uncover a pattern of racial harassment complaints that had mysteriously disappeared from official records. Her mission was clear: expose corruption without revealing her badge. But that was before the patrol car glided toward her, lights off, confidence on. "Afternoon, miss," said Sergeant Frank Miller, stepping out with a smirk that had never met accountability. He wasn't here to help. His presence wasn't protection, it was possession. "Lost, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone syrupy and sharp at the same time. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Mara replied evenly, nodding toward her new home, the glass-walled house at the corner. The sergeant laughed, calling over his two officers. "You hear that, boys? Says she lives here. Maybe she means she cleans here." Their laughter was a harmony of ignorance and arrogance. Mara stayed still, her eyes cold and calm, the way a sniper watches the wind before a shot. "I'm not here to explain myself," she said, her voice steady. "Now if you'll excuse me." Roberts, the bulky one, stepped in front of her. "Not so fast. We don't know you, and around here, we keep things safe." "Safe," Miller echoed, circling her like a wolf who thought he'd cornered prey. "A woman like you, walking alone in a place like this, people talk. You visiting your boss, sugar daddy, or what?" The insult landed in the air, but not in her spirit. Mara had heard worse, from men with better vocabulary. She inhaled, counted to 3, and let the silence speak louder than her rage. "Show me some ID," Miller demanded. "It's in my purse inside," she replied. "Oh, we can go inside together," he said, pretending to be generous. "Make sure everything's secure." His hand brushed her shoulder, slow and deliberate. That's when she knew. This wasn't policing, it was performance. And the audience was power. "Don't touch me," Mara said softly, the warning hidden beneath control. Miller smirked. "Relax, sweetheart. Around here, I am the law." Then he did it. The slap came not across her face but across her dignity, a sharp, disgusting crack against her backside. The laughter from his partners followed like applause. "That's for being in our neighborhood," he said. The world went silent for one stretched heartbeat. Mara's eyes rose to meet his. No tears, no tremor, just the slow birth of wrath. Inside her, the agent was awake. But outside, she stayed still. Calm. Dangerous. "Are you done?" she asked, her voice low and cutting. Miller tilted his head. "Oh, we're just getting started. Hands behind your back." She complied, because sometimes compliance was camouflage. As the cuffs clicked shut, she memorized everything. Badge numbers, the sun's position, the reflection from a window across the street. Every second was evidence. Every breath, a recording. As the cruiser door slammed behind her, the glass showed her reflection, a black woman in cuffs, framed by luxury. To them, it looked like victory. To her, it looked like proof. Inside that police car, as the engine started, Mara whispered under her breath, words too soft for anyone else to hear. "You have no idea who you just handcuffed." And with that, the real investigation began. The police station looked exactly how Mara imagined a rotten system would smell. Cheap disinfectant, old coffee, and fear trying to disguise itself as authority. The fluorescent lights buzzed like they were tired of witnessing the same mistakes. The sergeant strutted ahead of her, proud of his catch, while his partners followed, laughing softly as if this was a game. They didn't read her rights. They didn't need to. In their world, rules were optional when you believed you were the law. The booking counter was scratched and stained, a perfect reflection of the man behind it, Sergeant Henderson, balding and indifferent, reading yesterday's newspaper. "Another one, Frank?" he asked, barely glancing up. "Yup," Miller replied, his tone casual. Caught her wandering around Crestwood. Couldn't explain why she was there. "Soliciting," Henderson mumbled, already writing the word. Miller smirked. "Add resisting arrest while you're at it. She's got a mouth." Mara stood silent. Her mind was busy recording every word, every smirk, every false statement. This wasn't just an arrest, it was evidence, a pattern that had probably repeated for years. She was seeing the machine from the inside. The door opened, and in walked Chief Alan Miller. Older, sharper, colder. The resemblance to the sergeant was unmistakable. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his eyes a glacier blue that made the room temperature drop. "What's this?" he asked mildly, glancing at Mara. "Loitering," Frank said. "Possible solicitation." Alan's eyes traveled from Mara's face to the cuffs on her wrists, then down to her expensive heels. His expression didn't change. "You're far from home, miss." "Mara Lane," she said calmly. He smiled faintly. "Well, Mississippi Lane. Around here we like to keep our streets clean." The word clean hung in the air like poison gas. "Book her properly," he added, turning away. "And make sure it's by our book." The door to his office clicked shut behind him, the sound soft but final. Mara exhaled slowly. She knew that tone. She'd heard it before from men who hid corruption behind charm. But hearing it here, inside the very department she'd come to investigate, made the stakes real. The cell they led her to was painted an ugly shade of pale green. It had no clock, no window, just a metal bench and the faint hum of a light that flickered like guilt. The bars closed with a clang that echoed down the hallway. "Welcome to the Crestwood Hilton," Miller sneered. "Enjoy your stay." He left laughing, his boots fading into silence. For a moment, Mara sat perfectly still, counting her breaths. Panic wanted to rise, but discipline kept it locked down. She replayed everything in her head: the arrest, the words, the false report. Evidence. Patterns. Procedures violated. That was her weapon now. An hour passed before she heard soft footsteps approach. The young officer, Sutton, her nameplate read, appeared at the bars holding a cup of water. Her hands trembled. "Here," she whispered. Mara stepped forward, taking it carefully. "Thank you, Officer Sutton." Sutton swallowed hard. "They shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong." "No," Mara said gently, "I didn't. But they did. And now we both know it." Sutton looked terrified, glancing down the hallway. "You don't understand. Chief Miller runs this place. Everyone does what he says. If anyone complains, evidence disappears. People get reassigned, or worse." Mara's gaze softened. "You joined to help people, didn't you?" Sutton hesitated, then nodded. "Then help me now," Mara said. "You don't have to testify. You don't even have to speak to me again. I just need 5 minutes and a phone." The young officer's breath hitched. "If they find out." "They won't," Mara interrupted. "I'll take all the risk." Sutton stared at her for a long moment. Something inside her shifted, the first crack in years of silence. Finally, she whispered, "I'll see what I can do." She walked away quickly, leaving Mara alone again. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually Sutton returned with a nervous glance and a folded napkin. Inside it, hidden like contraband, was a small prepaid phone. "Trash can in the women's restroom," she whispered. 5 minutes. Mara's heart steadied. "Thank you, Officer Sutton. You just made history." The young woman left, her steps fast and frightened. Later, Mara pretended to be sick. "Food poisoning," she groaned, holding her stomach. Henderson grumbled, but called Sutton to escort her. "Take the lady to the restroom," he said, annoyed. Inside the small tiled room, Mara found the burner phone exactly where it should be. She dialed a number from memory, her direct superior, Deputy Director Harlan Evans. "Evans," the voice answered, brisk and cold. "Sir, it's Agent Vance. Code Sierra 9. I've been compromised. Crestwood PD is corrupt. Chief and Sergeant Miller, systemic abuse, falsified charges." "Stop," he interrupted. Sharply. "Where are you?" "In holding. I need extraction." Silence. Then Evans's tone changed. "Agent Vance, you're to stand down. That's a direct order." "What?" she whispered, her blood turning to ice. "Sir, they're criminals." "You don't understand," Evans hissed. "The Millers have friends in high places. They call me already. You're making waves that can't be contained. My hands are tied." Mara froze. "Sir, you spoke to them? They said you're unstable, making false claims. If you fight this, you'll be finished. Take the charge, walk away." The line went dead. For a moment, she stared at the phone, unable to breathe. The man she trusted, the man who recruited her, had betrayed her. When she stepped out, her face looked calm, but something inside her had shattered and reformed. The agent was gone. What stood now was something else, something forged by betrayal and injustice. Back in the cell, Sergeant Miller was waiting, grinning like a vulture. "Guess what, sweetheart? Just spoke to your boss. Said you're a troublemaker. Told me to handle it my way." He leaned close, his breath sour and smug. "Looks like nobody's coming to save you." Mara looked up at him, her eyes as dark and still as deep water. "You're right," she said softly. "No one's coming." Then she smiled. A slow, cold smile that made the sergeant step back without knowing why. "Which means," she whispered, "you should start praying." The city slept badly that night. Somewhere on the edge of town, in a one-room apartment that smelled of ink and regret, Jacob Riley was trying to drink his memories quiet. Once, he'd been the name on every front page, an investigative reporter who'd written truth sharp enough to draw blood. But then came the smear campaign, a DUI charge, a scandal that wasn't his, and a career buried under the weight of silence. He hadn't written a single line since. He was halfway through a bottle of cheap bourbon when the knock came. Not a confident knock, nervous, hesitant, almost apologetic. He ignored it. Then it came again, harder this time. Cursing, he shuffled to the door, expecting a landlord or a debt collector. When he opened it, the hallway light framed a young police officer with trembling hands and fear in her eyes. "Mr. Riley?" she asked softly. He blinked. "Depends who's asking." "My name is Officer Sutton," she said quickly, looking over her shoulder. "I shouldn't be here. But a woman told me to find you, the one they arrested in Crestwood Hills." She said, "Tell him the woman in the gray dress sent you." Riley's grip on the door tightened. "The woman in the gray dress," he repeated. The story had already hit police scanners. Unknown female, possibly trespassing. He'd dismissed it as another abuse of power in a long list he couldn't afford to care about. Until now. "She said to tell you Operation Nightfall is compromised," Sutton whispered. "She has proof." The words froze the air. Operation Nightfall. A codename Riley had chased years ago, a rumored federal investigation into police corruption that mysteriously vanished from headlines overnight. It had been the story that ended his career. "Where is she now?" he demanded, his voice suddenly sober. "In holding. But they're transferring her in the morning," Sutton said, her voice trembling. "Not to the county jail, they're planning something else. A detour." He didn't need to hear the rest. A detour meant a body that wouldn't make it to booking. Riley stepped back, running a hand through his unkempt hair. His pulse hammered against his ribs. "You're sure?" "I heard it myself," she said. "If they find out I told you." "Go," he interrupted, already moving toward his desk. "Go home. Forget you ever came here." She hesitated at the door. "Will you help her?" He looked at her, this frightened young officer risking everything for a stranger, and something old sparked inside him. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I will." The door closed, and for the first time in years, Jacob Riley moved with purpose. He tore the dust cover off his ancient laptop, the screen flickering to life like an old flame. His fingers shook as they opened folders marked Crestwood files. Dozens of half-finished articles, redacted documents, names of victims long forgotten. He scrolled until he found the one marked Miller Brothers. They'd run Crestwood like a fiefdom. The chief and his younger brother, untouchable, arrogant, protected by people higher up. He'd tried to expose them once. They destroyed him for it. But now, fate had delivered him the one thing every buried truth needs, a survivor who still had evidence. He reached for the burner phone Sutton had left on his table, its signal blinking faintly. It was untraceable. He knew what that meant. It was hers. The agent's. He plugged it into his computer, and a stream of coordinates began to appear. GPS data. A live signal. The blinking dot moved slowly across the map, heading west out of the city. "They're already moving her," he muttered, his heart pounding. He opened his old recorder app, set it to sync, and began typing feverishly. "Live feed, Crestwood PD transfer, possible abduction in progress." His hands hesitated only once. He glanced at the dusty award plaque hanging crookedly on his wall. Excellence in Investigative Journalism, 2015. He almost laughed. "Guess we're doing this again," he whispered. As he drove, the city blurred past in streaks of orange light and rain. The GPS signal led him toward the woods on the outskirts of town, Old Quarry Road, the kind of place where flashlights find more secrets than survivors. The road signs were faded, the trees crowding closer with every mile. Inside the police cruiser ahead, Mara Lane sat handcuffed, silent, and utterly aware. She could feel the tension radiating from the front seat. Sergeant Miller's voice broke the silence first. "Nice night for a drive," he said, forcing a laugh. Baxter, the younger officer, fidgeted. "Sarge, you sure about this? She's not like the others. The way she talks, it's like she knows something." "She's nothing," Miller snapped. "Just another stray who thought she could walk where she doesn't belong." Mara tilted her head, her calm voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "You really believe that?" The sergeant met her gaze in the mirror. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're making your last mistake," she said quietly. "You think you've buried everyone who ever stood against you. But this time, the grave you're digging isn't mine." Her words unnerved him. He looked away too quickly. Baxter shifted in his seat, glancing nervously out the window. "You talk too much," Miller muttered. "No," Mara said, her tone razor-sharp. "You confess too much." The forest swallowed the road. The sky darkened. Somewhere behind them, a lone car followed at a distance. Jacob Riley, chasing redemption on worn tires and stubborn faith. He glanced at his recorder, the live feed still streaming. Static, voices, coordinates. His gut told him what his head already knew. By morning, either he'd save a stranger or join the long list of people Crestwood had buried. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The road ahead curved sharply into darkness. And for the first time in years, Jacob Riley wasn't running from a story. He was running toward one. The early dawn mist hung over Old Quarry Road like a veil, soft and gray, hiding the truth beneath it. The police cruiser rolled slowly down the narrow lane, tires crunching gravel, the trees pressing close like silent witnesses. Inside, Mara sat between the echoes of her own heartbeat, her wrists cuffed, her ankles shackled, and yet her mind sharper than ever. Every second that passed was a calculation: distance, timing, probability. Sergeant Frank Miller drove, with his jaw clenched tight. His face was swollen from the blow she had given him earlier, but his pride hurt far worse. Beside him, Baxter's hands fidgeted near his weapon, nervous and unsure. In the back seat, Officer Roberts, the largest of them all, sat beside Mara like a guard dog waiting for a command. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice calm, curious even. "The county facility," Miller lied, eyes fixed on the empty road. "No," she said softly. "You passed the turn 15 minutes ago." Silence filled the car. Baxter swallowed. "Sarge, maybe we should just—" "Shut up, Kevin," Miller barked. "You think she's smarter than me? I've been doing this job longer than you've been shaving." Mara turned her head slightly, studying him through the cage of reflection in the rearview mirror. "You've been abusing this job longer than that," she said. "And you still don't know when you've lost." Miller slammed the brakes so hard the cruiser skidded sideways. Gravel sprayed against the door. "You don't talk to me like that," he growled, twisting in his seat. "You don't talk at all unless I say so." The gun in his hand glinted. Baxter froze, sweat beading his forehead. Roberts cracked his knuckles, more out of habit than confidence. Mara didn't blink. "Do you know what I am?" Miller's lip curled. "A mouthy girl who doesn't know when to shut up." She smiled, a cold, steady smile that didn't belong to fear. "I'm the woman who's going to destroy everything you built." The car went silent again, but this time the quiet wasn't control, it was confusion. Miller's grip faltered just a little, the word destroy echoing in his skull like a warning bell. "You think anyone's listening?" he sneered. "You think anyone cares?" Mara leaned back, her voice dropping into a calm whisper. "I think you've been talking to me long enough to incriminate yourself 3 times over. And I think someone's already listening." Baxter's head snapped around. "What?" Miller frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The microphone," she said. "The one you didn't find. It's been recording since Crestwood. Every threat, every word, every laugh. And it's live." Miller's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "You're bluffing." "Maybe," she said. "You want to take that chance?" Panic flickered behind his eyes. The men exchanged looks. Roberts swore under his breath. "Turn it off," Miller snapped. "Where is it?" "You'll never find it," Mara replied. "But everyone else will." That broke him. He threw open his door, stomped around to the back, and yanked hers open. "Out," he barked. She didn't resist. She stepped out, the chains around her ankles clinking softly against the concrete. The forest around them smelled of wet earth and old secrets. The morning light was pale and distant, filtering through the trees like a witness too afraid to testify. Roberts came up behind her, his hand heavy on her arm. "You gonna tell us where it is?" he muttered. Mara tilted her head. "I already did. It's everywhere." "Enough," Miller snapped. "There's an abandoned construction site up ahead. We'll finish this there." They marched her down the dirt path toward the half-built foundations of what was supposed to be Crestwood's new luxury project, abandoned years ago when the funding vanished into administrative costs. The air smelled of rust and rainwater. Concrete pits gaped open, dark and silent, half-filled with stagnant water. Miller stopped near the edge of one, panting. "This'll do," he said. "Last chance. Tell me who you're working for." Mara's eyes met his, calm and endless. "Justice," she said simply. He laughed, an ugly, desperate sound. "Justice? You think that badge makes you special?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping to ice. "No, but it makes you accountable." That was the trigger. He lunged forward, grabbing her by the front of her dress, shoving the cold barrel of his gun against her temple. "You think you can take me down?" he hissed. "Out here, there's no law, no cameras, no witnesses." And that's when she smiled. "Are you sure about that?" she whispered. Before he could react, she slammed her heel down on his foot, spun her shoulders, and drove her head backward into his nose. The crunch of bone was loud and final. Miller screamed, dropping his weapon. She kicked it away, then pivoted on her shackled feet, swinging the chain like a blade. It caught Baxter's wrist, sending his gun flying into the mud. Roberts charged. She ducked, using his momentum against him, twisting until both of them teetered on the edge of the pit. "You're done," she said, and pushed. His scream ended in a splash below. Miller stumbled backward, blood pouring from his nose, fury burning in his eyes. You don't know what you've started." "Oh, I do," Mara said, breathing hard but steady. "I started the truth." Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. The sound made Miller's face drain of color. He turned toward the road, but it was too late. Tires screeched, headlights cut through the trees, and black SUVs rolled into the clearing like storm clouds on wheels. The FBI insignia gleamed under the rising sun. Miller dropped his gun. Baxter froze. Mara straightened her back, wrists still cuffed, but spirit unbroken. "You're under arrest, Sergeant," she said, her tone flat and final. An agent approached her carefully. "Agent Lane." She nodded once. "You're late." The man smiled faintly. "Traffic." He knelt, unlocking her cuffs. Freedom felt heavier than the metal had. Around her, chaos unfolded. The officers in custody, the pit cordoned off, the agents documenting every fragment. Through it all, Mara's gaze caught on a familiar face, Jacob Riley, standing by his rusted car, holding a recorder. Their eyes met for a single, wordless second. It was enough. Two people broken by the same corruption had just brought it crashing down. By mid-morning, Crestwood's police headquarters looked less like a station and more like a crime scene. Yellow tape fluttered where Pride once stood. Reporters crowded the gates, cameras flashing, questions flying through the humid air like sparks. Inside, the walls that had held decades of silence were cracking open, file drawers ripped out, hard drives seized, names whispered that were never supposed to be spoken aloud. Mara sat in a quiet conference room, a blanket draped around her shoulders, steam rising from a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Across from her sat a federal investigator, one of her own, Agent Cruz, Internal Affairs, stoic but kind-eyed. "You did well," he said finally, flipping through the preliminary report. "The recordings, the GPS, the testimony, it's airtight. You've just dismantled an empire." Mara didn't smile. "No," she said quietly. "I just opened the door. Someone else has to walk through it." Through the glass wall, she could see Sergeant Frank Miller being led away in handcuffs, head lowered, face swollen, his swagger gone. Behind him, his younger partner Baxter cried openly, muttering something about not meaning for it to go that far. The irony was bitter. They had spent years making others feel powerless, and now it was their turn to face it. In the hallway beyond them, Chief Alan Miller stood between two federal marshals, trying to project calm, but his eyes betrayed him. He looked older now, fragile even, the illusion of control finally stripped away. "You people don't understand," he barked as they passed. "You can't just take over my city." Mara met his gaze through the glass. "It was never your city," she said softly. It just stopped being your lie. The chief looked away first. Hours later, the media storm erupted. News outlets played fragments of the live audio Mara had captured. The threats, the laughter, the confessions. Viewers around the country listened in disbelief as corruption unfolded word by word. Headlines called her the woman in the gray dress, an unintentional symbol of courage and control. Jacob Riley's story went live the same night. His article wasn't polished, it wasn't poetic, but it was true. He published the full transcript, the evidence, and his own account of how a broken reporter found purpose again. Within hours, the post spread like wildfire, shared, quoted, dissected, and praised. The same name the Millers had destroyed now topped every national broadcast. In the days that followed, the dominoes fell fast. Chief Miller was indicted on multiple federal charges: racketeering, obstruction, abuse of power. Sergeant Frank Miller faced charges of assault, unlawful detention, and attempted homicide. Henderson, the lazy desk sergeant, was arrested for tampering with evidence. Dozens of officers resigned overnight, their badges suddenly too heavy to wear. But Mara didn't celebrate. She watched it all from a quiet office downtown, now officially reinstated under her real name, Special Agent Maya Vance. The Bureau wanted to call her a hero. They wanted her face in front of cameras, to show the world that the system could fix itself. She refused. "I don't want to be a headline," she told Deputy Director Cruz. "I want change that lasts longer than applause." He nodded. "Then help us build it." And so she did. Maya was appointed to lead a new federal task force, Operation Dignity. Its purpose: to investigate systemic corruption in local law enforcement, to ensure what happened in Crestwood never repeated elsewhere. She filled the team with people who had once been silenced, rookie cops like Sutton, veteran investigators like Cruz, and civilians like Jacob Riley. The first meeting was small, almost ordinary. A whiteboard, cold pizza, cheap coffee. Yet, as she stood at the head of the table, Maya felt something sacred in the simplicity. "We're not here to destroy departments," she said. "We're here to rebuild trust. Every report we file, every person we protect, it matters." Jacob leaned back in his chair, notebook in hand, eyes tired but alive again. "You think they'll ever really change?" he asked. Maya looked at him. "People change when it costs them not to." He chuckled softly. "That's a quote I'll steal." Sutton, sitting quietly in the corner, raised her hand like she was back in training. "What about the ones still scared to speak? The ones who saw but didn't act?" Maya nodded slowly. "We don't punish fear," she said. "We replace it with courage." The words hung in the air for a long moment. Simple, but they felt like a promise. Outside, Crestwood was changing too. The city held community forums where citizens and officers sat at the same table for the first time in decades. Victims of false arrests came forward, and their cases were reopened. Street murals appeared overnight, painted by local artists, showing a woman standing unbroken beneath a storm, her eyes fierce and calm. Maya visited the site one evening, long after the crowds had gone. The mural glowed under the streetlights, her likeness, but not her doing. Someone had written beneath it in white paint, "Justice is not revenge. It's repair." She smiled faintly, tracing the words with her gaze. For the first time in months, she felt peace, not the fragile, fleeting kind, but the deep, steady peace of someone who had done what they were born to do. Back at headquarters, she kept one small trophy on her desk, a paperweight in the shape of a broken chain link. It had been sent anonymously, wrapped in newspaper, no note attached. She suspected it was from Jacob. Every time she touched it, she remembered the night on Old Quarry Road. The mist, the fear, the sound of chains breaking. It reminded her that even small acts, even quiet defiance, can ignite revolutions. And when her team asked why she kept it there, she would only say, "Because justice starts with remembering what it costs." The Bureau called her victory historic. Maya called it overdue. A month after the storm, Crestwood Hills looked almost normal again. The streets were clean, lawns trimmed, children laughing in the same parks that once whispered rumors about the wrong kind of people. But beneath that calm, something real had shifted. The silence that once protected corruption had been replaced by cautious honesty. The neighborhood still wore its wealth like armor, but now, it also carried something new: awareness. At sunrise, Maya Vance stood on the balcony of the glass-walled house where it had all begun. The same street that once felt like enemy territory was now home. She wore jeans and a loose white shirt, her badge resting on the counter beside a cooling cup of tea. The morning air was crisp, scented with wet grass and distant rain. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for a phone call, a code, or a crisis. Just quiet. Down below, Officer Sutton walked the beat in her new uniform. Her posture was taller, her steps more certain. The same girl who once whispered apologies through cell bars was now part of something bigger, a department being rebuilt from the inside, one small act of courage at a time. Across town, Jacob Riley sat at a cluttered desk surrounded by open notebooks and glowing screens. His article, The Woman in the Gray Dress, had earned him national acclaim, a Pulitzer nomination, and more interview requests than he could handle. But fame wasn't what he cared about. On the wall above his desk, pinned beside his press badge, was a single photo. Maya standing in the rain the night of the rescue, her wrists still red from the cuffs. Beneath it, he'd written 4 words: "Truth is never quiet." Maya's new task force, Operation Dignity, had already expanded to 3 states. She led with precision and patience, refusing shortcuts. Every investigation they opened was methodical, transparent, and humane. Her team called her Director Vance now, but she preferred when they forgot the title and just called her Maya. Leadership, she'd learned, wasn't about authority, it was about steadiness. One afternoon, she visited the newly reopened community center. It was packed, families, teachers, and officers sitting side by side in folding chairs. A mural stretched across the far wall, a woman in a gray dress standing before a storm, sunlight breaking through behind her. Beneath it, in bold white letters, "Respect is not earned by power, but by presence." When Maya stepped onto the small stage, the crowd quieted. She didn't carry notes or a script. She simply spoke. "I've been called many things this year," she began. "Agent, victim, hero, but I'm none of those alone. I'm one of many who decided that silence was no longer safety." Her eyes moved across the crowd, neighbors, officers, reporters, even children. "Justice," she continued, "isn't something that arrives fully formed. It's built, repaired, and sometimes fought for inch by inch. It's the teacher who reports what others ignore, the officer who refuses an order that feels wrong, the citizen who records what the world wants to forget. Every one of you has power, just not the kind you can flash on a badge." A hush fell. Sutton, seated near the back, wiped her eyes quietly. Maya smiled faintly. "We used to think the enemy was out there, in the uniform, the system, the institution. But the truth is, injustice lives in habits, in silence, in convenience. And the only cure for it is courage." The applause started small, then grew until the entire hall echoed. But Maya didn't bask in it. She looked down for a moment, almost humbled by the weight of their hope. When the sound faded, she added one last line, simple but final: "Respect everyone, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Later that evening, as twilight painted the sky orange and blue, she walked home through Crestwood Hills. The houses glowed with warm light, and for once, no one watched her with suspicion. Some even smiled. One elderly neighbor, the same man who had filmed her arrest through his blinds weeks ago, stepped onto his porch. "Evening, Agent Vance," he called softly. "Welcome home." She paused, smiled back, and nodded. "Thank you. It's good to finally be home." Inside, the house was quiet. The red silk dress, the one she'd worn the day of her arrest, hung in a glass frame near the entryway. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "Every scar tells a story worth surviving." On her desk sat the paperweight shaped like a broken chain link, the one Jacob had sent. Next to it, a framed photo of her task force, Sutton grinning awkwardly, Cruz holding coffee, and Riley mid-sarcastic smirk. Her family now. She poured herself tea and opened her notebook. The first page was blank, waiting. Slowly, she wrote, "What we keep. The courage to speak when silence feels safer. The memory of pain turned into purpose. The truth that no one is beneath justice." She closed the book and leaned back, watching the city lights shimmer beyond the glass. Crestwood was still imperfect, still human, but it was finally honest. And honesty, she thought, was a good place to start. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Jacob. "Heard you turned down another TV deal. Remind me again why I'm the one doing interviews?" She smiled and typed back, Because you talk prettier than I do. Besides, someone has to keep the spotlight warm. His reply came seconds later. You just like the quiet. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she answered. No. I just like the truth. Outside, the night settled over Crestwood like a blanket. Soft, real, unpretending. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, but it wasn't a cry of danger anymore. It was a promise of vigilance, a reminder that someone was still watching, still protecting, still learning. Maya turned off the lights and stood by the window. Her reflection stared back, stronger, wiser, scarred, but whole. Justice isn't something we finish, she whispered into the dark. It's something we keep alive. And with that, she walked away from the glass, her shadow merging with the soft golden light of her home. No longer hunted, no longer hiding, but finally free.